Now, to steal a phrase from Paul Harvey, before we get into the rest of the story, I have a couple little things that I want to share. First, some of you may know, and the rest of you are about to, I do a little blog on Facebook called Life with My Blind Wife. If you're on Facebook, look it up. I make it public so everybody can see it, and it's basically a little just anecdotes and funny stories and things that happen to us. And I'm going to give you a preview right now of the next episode. So 2-3 weeks ago, Katie and I were at my youngest son Asher's soccer game. And to describe it, the way Katie describes her vision is that it's like looking through a straw underwater. So think about going to McDonald's and getting a plastic straw and looking through that straw and dunking your head down in a swimming pool and then trying to make out what's on the other side, and that would be what she sees or can see. So it's actually very nice that Asher's soccer jerseys, his team is bright yellow, and she can make out the little kids in the yellow jerseys running up and down the soccer field. And we were sitting there in our chairs watching the soccer game. And sometimes, now granted these are third and fourth graders, sometimes you get a kid that matures a little faster than the others, and Katie looks over at me and she says, "That one kid is huge." And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking, I'm trying to pick out which kid she's talking about. Turns out she was talking about the maybe 5'10", 5'11", 40-year-old kid with the beard and the yellow and black striped shirt. It was the referee. So
he looked all the same to me. It's
he had a yellow shirt on, so I got to give her credit for that. So that's a little preview of my next episode. But now Marcia and Linda don't know this, but if you guys were here today at church, you saw this picture in the bulletin. And this morning when I got out of bed, I didn't know that they were going to use this picture. As is my routine, sitting, getting ready, looking at my phone, I open up Facebook. There's a tab on Facebook called Memories. This photograph was taken 5 years ago today as we went on a motorcycle. I don't remember what the ride was, but to me that just says there are no coincidences. And hopefully as you'll see as we talk, none of this was coincidence. There is nothing that happened in this that was coincidence. And hopefully we will be able to fulfill whatever God's purpose is for these trials, for whatever it may be. And that's just my prayer, is that we can follow his plan and do what he needs us to do. And actually, if we could just take a moment and let me pray. Heavenly Father, I'd ask that you place your hands on us and that you allow the words that you want us to speak to come out of our mouths, that we may touch some hearts, we may help someone heal, whatever your purpose is for us, Lord, we just ask that we have the strength and the wisdom to follow it and fulfill it. And it's in your Son, Jesus' name, amen. Okay, now, the rest of the story. In order for you guys to kind of figure out where we're at, I think it's important that we talk about where we came from, how we got to this point. As you saw in the video, Katie and I were both Lexington police officers. At the time of the accident, she had been on for 14 years. I currently have 20 years, and I'm still active. Obviously, something about giving a blind girl a gun and letting her drive a car around answering calls, they didn't think that was a good idea. So Katie ended up having to retire after the accident. We met on the job. Both of us are divorced, and we actually had a casual acquaintance friendship up until the divorce. And then one day we ended up on the same call, and we started talking, and I could tell that she was hurting. She was having trouble with her divorce, and I've been there. Mine was not quite as fresh. And so we went to lunch. We had lunch, and turns out pretty much from there on, I can't think of a day that we worked the same day that we didn't have lunch together. And so one thing led to another, and it became more than just friends. And I ended up deciding that this is who I wanted to spend my life with. And I proposed actually out on the farm that we live on now. And we decided that that's where we were going to get married. So we're working on getting the farm ready for a wedding. A few weeks before the wedding, we're going to go out and spray fence rows. We had a Kawasaki Terex. For those of you that don't know, it's a pretty good sized 4-wheel drive ATV. It's a side-by-side. We had it for a while, and we had sold it. This was the last time that we were going to use this machine. We had sold a few things and trying to get bills where they needed to be, get rid of a little debt, and we went out as we drove along the fence row, down she'll call it the south side of the property, but it's really the east. Drive down the east side of the property, waved at the neighbor. He was out feeding cows. We get down to the bottom of the field, and we need to go from the east side to the west side. This being the last time we were in this machine, I turned west and hit the gas to go across the field. I hit the gas, and we went ripping across the field. She let out a woohoo, We get over to the west side, and I'm sitting here thinking in my head, do we continue fence rows, or do we play for just a minute? Fence rows, play. Fence rows, play. I'm going to play for just a second. Turn that wheel to the left, and I mash the gas, get a couple good donuts out of it. It starts to tip to the right. I turn that wheel hard to the right, feather the gas a little bit, try to bring it back down. When it came down, something that I didn't realize when we started, left front tire was flat. When that left side came back down onto the ground, the tire rolled off the bead. The rim dug into the ground and just immediately tripped it, sent it to the left hard. I got thrown out to the left, and she came out behind me. The roll bar hit me in the back on the way out, landed on her face. I turned around, I said, "Babe, are you okay?" I didn't hear anything. Ran back over to the machine, and I looked in, and I could see it laying on her. And I grabbed the roll bar, and I picked it up, and I could see she was hurt. She was injured badly. And that kind of one of the bad things about being in police work for so long and being a collision reconstructionist, I've seen some bad ones, and I knew this was right there. I tried to pick it up, and I couldn't. We were sitting downhill a little bit, And I told her, I said, Katie, I'm going to lift this up, and I need you to scoot out because I'm not going to be able to hold it and pull you out at the same time. She said, okay. And I did it. I lifted it up as far as I could, and she squirmed out. Grabbed the phone, called the neighbor. I said, I need your help. We flipped the four-wheeler. He and his son-in-law and daughter hopped in their truck, came ripping across the field. As they were coming, I called 911. They asked if we could get her up to the road. And I said yes. We picked her up and put her in the back of the truck, and I laid on the tailgate and I held her, praying my head off the whole way. I don't think I've ever prayed so hard for months. Get up to the top and up to the top of the road where Bradford Lane meets Curry Pike, waiting for the ambulance to come. Took them like 5 days. And as soon as they got there, the ambulance driver, who was the older of the two on the buggy, walks over, looks at her laying in the bed of the truck, and turns to the younger guy. He says, call the bird.
I was there, but I wasn't, if that makes any sense. I remember going across the field, and I remember the first impact that happened and the ATV. I don't remember being thrown. I just remember laying there kind of wondering what happened. And I knew I wasn't able to move my legs, but I had no idea that the roll bar was actually on my face. But I could hear Todd, and I could hear him calling for help. And I remember laying there, and I thought, this is not good. I don't feel any pain. But I know enough, like Todd said, from being an officer and seeing all these accidents, I know enough to know that in combination with what I felt initially and the fact that I don't feel any pain now was probably the worst of the worst. And as I'm laying there, I'm saying to myself, this is it. I'm going to die in this back part of the field. And things start running through your mind when you are that close to death and you know it. And the first thought that came to my mind was, does Todd know how much I love him? Have I told him today how much I love him? Because I can't die and not have him know what he means to me. So the first words out of my mouth that I managed to mumble was, no matter what happens, I love you. Just remember that. And then I was laying there and I was listening to him call for help, and I got mad. You know, you see in the movies when you're getting ready to die and this bright light comes and you get all this kind of warm and fuzzy feeling, and you know, you're happy because you've made a commitment to God, and when you're ready to die, okay, that's the time that God takes you and you're ready for it, you know? And I always said, when God's ready for me, when he's going to take me, it'll be okay because I'll be ready. And I was laying there in that field and I got mad. And I'm not ready to die. I got stuff I got to do. You know, I got people that
fence rows to clear.
I have fence rows to clear. You know, and you start thinking about what truly matters in your life. And it's not money, and it's not property, and it's not the way you look, and it's not what you get done every day. You know, when you're that close to death and you truly think that you're getting ready to die, it's, you know, does my husband know how much I love him? Have I told my mom and my dad how much I love him? Have I, you know, that's the stuff. Everything else just disappears. And I could hear the neighbor coming, and they toss me in the back of the pickup truck, and they drive the bumpiest way possible all the way up to the road. I'm not sure how many potholes they hit, but it felt like a lot. And I remember laying there thinking, okay, I'm waiting to hear for this ambulance. And I hear them pull up. And I'm like, okay, great, you know. And at this time, I couldn't speak. Everything just kind of shut down, kind of locked up. And I remember laying there, and I'm like, okay, good. Ambulance is here. They're going to whisk me off. I'll be good to go. No problem. You know, you go from 1 minute thinking you're going to die, and then you have that hope of, well, that's what they do. They save people, so I'm going to be okay. And I can hear the ambulance driver walk up, and I can hear him approach the truck, and he pauses. And I hear him turn around and say to somebody, call Life Flight. And the guy says, what? And he says, call Life Flight. She's not going to make it. And I thought, holy crap, are they talking about me? I'm going to make it. Like I'm still here, you know, and all this is going in my head. I'm talking to myself just the same way I'm talking to you guys now. You know, on the exterior, I'm not able to speak or communicate, but on the inside, I'm like assessing the situation. Okay, well, this is not good, and I know there's a couple people there, and what does it mean I'm not going to make it? Because I'm here. I'm still alive. Please don't give up on me, because I've seen it. You know, I've seen where you go to scenes, and you know, oh gosh, she's a goner. We just got to do what we got to do, and I'm thinking, negative. I am going to be here, so you better work your butt off to save me, because I ain't going nowhere. And things just kind of happened. They were working pretty hard, and then I hear the helicopter come in. And I'm like, whew, okay, here comes the helicopter.
They took another 5 days, by the way.
And from my understanding, at that point, I don't have any recollection of them working on me or getting in the helicopter because they induced me in a coma before they put me in there.
And then before they loaded her in the helicopter, that was another 5 days. So I laid there waiting while they were working on her for a total of like 15 days. The neighbor actually took me back to the house. Our neighbor's wife showed up at this point. She was a nurse, and she said, Todd, you're going to be at the hospital for a while, so why don't you go ahead and take a shower and put on some fresh clothes, because you're going to be there for a while. Turns out that while I was taking the shower, they were having a conversation about how they don't know how to tell me that she's not coming home. Of course, little did they know that I already knew that. On the way to the hospital, I think I called my dad. Called my ex to tell her that I wasn't going to be able to pick up the boys anytime soon. Those were the only 2 phone calls that I made. We get about 2/3 of the way to Lexington, and one of my sergeants calls. Says, "Hey, buddy, we're all here at the hospital. We're here. We got a place you just pull right up behind. We'll take care of your car. We'll take care of everything. Don't worry about it." And I get there, and there are tons of police there. And anybody that knows anything about when an officer gets injured, police show up at the hospital, and especially the worse it is, the more police show up. And there were cruisers everywhere. And I thought, how in the world did they know? Because I hadn't called any of them. The folks on the helicopter had radioed on the way, and they said, somebody might want to call the police department and let them know we're on the way with a Lexington police officer, and she's not going to make it. So that's how they knew. I got there, and apparently between the time that the sergeant called me and the time that I got there, they had done a few scans, and they got her stabilized. So by the time I got there, I remember somehow my dad beat us to the hospital. I don't know where he was coming from, but he doesn't drive very fast. And
That ought to say something.
And I told Dad, and Dad told me, he said, from what I understand, and now this may have even been 2 hours later. It all kind of runs together. He said, from what I understand, they've got her stabilized. They're just trying to assess what's going on, but at this point, it's looking positive. She's not going to die. They convinced me to go. After several hours, they cleared me. They took me up to see her. She was still in the medically induced coma. I talked to her for a little bit and then went home and tried to sleep. The next several days are kind of a blur. They all run together, and throughout that time, she's got like 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 700 doctors that each of them have a different function, and had eye doctors, face doctors, dentists, and I guess it was 3 or 4 days in, the eye doctor came in and pulled all of us into the room and said, well, her right eye has been destroyed through the bone. The bone fragments have crushed her right eye and punctured the eyeball, and we're going to have to remove that. And they also told us at that time that the blood flow to her left eye had been blocked, and that once blood flow is cut off for 90 minutes, the eye dies. She's not going to be able to see.
At this time, I was conscious. I was out of the coma, and I remember them coming in. It died.
She's technologically challenged anyway, so here, we'll share.
Okay. So I was being told of what kind of injuries I had and what had happened. And they said, you have what they call the 4, 1, 2, and 3 fractures happened to your face. So basically what that means, anything from right behind your ears forward was crushed. It was like pea gravel. You had no bones left in your face whatsoever. Everything had been demolished. And they said, you're going to be blind. And I don't recall ever, a lot of the memory for the first few weeks, I don't have. And I believe that is by the grace of God. He didn't want me to remember certain things. He didn't, it was going to be too much. And because I had a trach in, I wasn't able to speak. My face was gone. And my family had a big pad of paper and a pen. And they said, the doctors were there, and they said, okay, you're going to be blind. I said, okay. And they're waiting for a reaction. And I kind of went like this. It's kind of like the cue of, hey, I got something to say. And someone who was standing there said, do you remember what you wrote? I said, I wrote something. I don't have a clue. I don't have any memory of that. And they said, after hearing that your face is demolished and your eyes are gone and this is going to be your life, you wrote, it's in God's hands. It's okay. And after hearing that, I'm like, well, why would I have said that? That would not have been my first reaction. I've got a lot more thoughts running through my head, a lot more things I was going to say. And that would have come out eventually, but the only thing I wrote was, it's okay, it's in God's hands. And they said, you'll never see again. I said, well, it is what it is. What are you going to do, And at that time, that started one of 19 surgeries. So a couple weeks ago, I just completed 19 surgeries and 25 months, all to my face. And they're slowly putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. It's been a lot of pain and a lot of surgeries, but the damage was just so extensive that, that's what they had to do. And I remember after getting done with I call it the big surgery. It's where they kind of took my face off and rebuilt it. I don't have any bones left in my face. It's all metal. And they fixed me back up and stitched me back together. And I remember coming out of the anesthesia and not really knowing what had happened, but that's where I remember my memory coming back from. And they kind of explained again what happened and what was going on. And they said, okay, we're going to have to put you through therapy. You have to learn how to be blind. And I really kind of wasn't looking forward to that at all. I was kind of angry at that point. And about a couple weeks later, the therapist came in and she said, okay, sweetie, she said, hop up. We're going to go for a walk. I need to teach you how to walk with a guide. Okay, fine, whatever, And we're walking down the hallway, and out of nowhere, from this left side, I see this light. And you got to wonder at this point, is your head screwing with you? What's going on? And I turned toward her and I said, is that a window? And she breaks down bawling, crying. And that's the day that we discovered that I have 1% vision left in my left eye. And you ask, if your optic nerve is dead, how do you have 1% vision? Less than 10% of people have an extra vein in their eye that comes from a different part of their brain, and it feeds the upper left portion of your eye. And it's the tiniest vein that runs to your eye. Out of all the damage that happened to my face, this itty little vein not only was there, but it wasn't damaged. And that's the only reason why I've been able to see a little bit. I remember laying in the hospital and they were doing all these scans on me. And initially they told Todd that if she does survive, she's going to have severe brain damage. Nobody can have that kind of an accident, crush that much of their face, and not have severe brain damage. And I remember a friend of ours coming in who was a nurse. She gives me pats and she's like, honey, you don't have any brain damage. And I said, what? Of course I don't have any brain damage.
At least none you didn't already start with.
And she goes, you don't have any brain damage. She said, doctor did a scan, looked at it, thought it was wrong, so he did another scan. Well, thought it was wrong, so he brought in another doctor who looked at it and said, no, that's not right. She's got to have some sort of brain damage. And did another scan. Lo and behold, I don't have any brain damage. So not only do nobody asked you. So not only do I not have any brain damage, but I'm able to see a little bit at this point. When we go home, that's when reality kicks in. You go back to the place where the accident happened, and you have all these emotions running through you, and you realize at this point that your life is never going to be the same. Nothing is fair. Nothing will work. I've been through the anger. I've been through the sadness. I've been through the confusion. I've been through the questioning. But somebody said to me when I was at the hospital and I was going through my angry stage, and she said, Katie, you have a right to be angry, but don't be angry for long because you're alive. God has given you another chance to live. And that's when everything kind of kind of sunk in for me is that, yes, I'm different. Yes, I've lost so much. But I am here. I don't have any brain damage, at least according to the doctors. And I can see a little bit. And I'm just going to have to figure it out and get around and learn how life is going to be. And everybody said, aren't you mad at God? You know, aren't you angry that he did this to you? How can you, go back to church? How can you thank him? How can you do all this stuff? I'd be so angry. And it was quite the opposite. I was angry at the situation, but I was never angry with God. And if anything, God has been more present in my life because I'm here and I'm able to walk and I'm able to talk and I'm able to see things and see my family and tell my husband how much I love him every day. And it's not about being angry. God doesn't promise you an easy life. He doesn't promise you that things are going to be okay all the time. But the biggest thing that I've learned is that no matter what happens, God, from the very beginning, has stood by our side, by my side, and has gotten us through all of this. And yes, I don't see much anymore, but I discovered after not seeing that I really wasn't seeing things to begin with when I did have my sight. I mean, if you think about it, you wake up and you go about your day and you look at things, but do you really see them? And when that's taken away from you and you wake up and you're being told that you'll never look into the face of your husband again and you'll never be able to see a sunset again, that changes your whole perspective. And things that I can see now, I cherish. I cherish seeing the sunrise. I cherish seeing the trees blow in the wind and the horses. And I love to be able to somewhat look at my husband and see the expressions on his face. And that's a gift that God has given us. And maybe it's just because I became so close to dying that I'm able to look back and say, he has saved me from everything. And Todd always said from the beginning that for everything that had went wrong, there are so many things that have gone right. And you think to yourself, out of everything that's gone wrong, of course everything went wrong. What do you mean there's not all this stuff that's gone right? But it has.
Now let's back up a little bit. Go back to the day that this happened. What went wrong? Well, I made the wrong decision. We weren't, something I had done in that machine hundreds of times, but we weren't equipped for it. Didn't have helmets on, weren't wearing our seatbelts. But what went right? As we went down the field, I saw the neighbor. I waved to the neighbor. I knew he was there. He doesn't usually carry his phone with him when he's feeding the cows. Get to that in a second. When that machine flipped, everything that was in the machine came out. The sprayer, the tools that we had sitting in there. I lost a shoe. Everything in that machine was tossed out into the field. I hadn't brought my phone out with me. I always bring my phone. For some reason, the one who hates her phone, who never brings it anywhere, leaves it sitting on the tables in restaurants. For some reason, she brought her phone with her. Before I ran up to the house, because I thought that's what I was going to have to do, I thought there's no way I'm going to find this phone. She had taken her phone and thrown it in a little cubby up in the front of the side-by-side. I looked in, I reached in, there it was. It was still where she had set it. I have no idea how. Called the neighbor, picked up, first ring. When called the ambulance driver. He wasn't supposed to be on duty that day. Turns out that he's one of their senior guys. He's one of their best trauma EMTs. He was on duty that day. He had taken the shift for somebody else. Do you want to talk about George? Now the real good stuff.
So now we're going to talk about my partner in crime down here that's passed out, I think. Sleeping through all this. I got George up in New Jersey at a place called the Seeing Eye. And when you apply for a dog, there's this huge application process. It's worse than buying a house. I mean, the documents you have to show and all the testing that you have to go through, and they send somebody out to your house to evaluate your home life. And I remember the lady coming out, and she was checking everything out, and she said, okay, I want to let you know that we're going to try to get you in as soon as possible, get a dog, but we have to make sure that there is the right dog for you. And she says, you live on a farm, you're really active, you've got horses and donkeys and chickens and cats and dogs and kids. And she said, that's kind of a big thing. She says, most dogs are not going to be able to handle all that. And she says, I'm going to be honest, it's going to be hard finding you a dog that's going to match. I said, I understand. And she says, do you have any preference? And I said, nah, I want something that's going to work best for me. I was secretly hoping for a shepherd, but you don't get a pick. You may be able to give an idea, but they base the dog on the personality and your personality and what you need them for. And she goes back, submits her paperwork, and a couple days later I get this phone call. It says, we found you a dog. And I said, oh, wow, that was quick. And she says, can you be here in less than a week? I was like, oh, sure. And what they do is they fly you to New Jersey, and you spend almost 5 weeks there, where they issue your dog and you train with a class. And you have to graduate from there before they'll ship you home. And everybody kind of had rolling bets if I was going to get a lab or a shepherd or a retriever. And Todd said he won. I was thinking I was going to get a lab. And on the third day, they walk in with George. And he comes up and immediately gives me kisses, and I'm loving him. He's exactly what I'm looking for. And I call my aunt. And she says, what did you get? And I said, I got a male shepherd named George. And she got real quiet. I said, well, what's wrong? And she said, your great-grandfather lost some of his vision in a farming accident. And the dog that he used to help him get around the farm was a male shepherd named George. I said, oh, wow, okay. So fast forward about another 2 weeks, and the trainer comes in and he says, hey, I have a letter from the puppy raiser. And what that means is kind of like a closed adoption. You have somebody, a family, that raises the dogs from the time that they're weaned, about 8 weeks, until just prior to a year. And they're called puppy raisers. And they get the dogs exposed to everything that that the dogs are going to be needing in the future for their training. And a lot of the puppy raisers don't write letters talking about the dogs because they don't know who's going to get them. They don't know when they're going to be trained. They don't know, what they're going to be doing or where they're going to be going. But I just happened to get a letter from my puppy raiser. And my trainer said, hey, you want me to read it to you? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So she proceeds to tell me about George and what it was like for him growing up. And she says, George grew up on a small farm in New Jersey. His daily routine was feeding horses, and then him and his puppy mom would go and collect eggs from the chicken yard. He would always bring her the eggs and drop them at her feet, which you can imagine didn't go well, but he was very pleased to do so. And then he would go in and play with her 2 kids and the other 3 dogs and the cats. And my trainer knew a lot about me at this time, and he starts to tear up. And he said, this is insane. I've never heard of anything like this before. And those of you who don't know us, we have a farm. We had 60 chickens at the time. I have horses and donkeys. We have 3 dogs, cats, and he has 2 kids. So if you look at what he grew up as, with the chickens and the horses and the kids, which were the same age as Todd's kids. We have 3 additional dogs at home. They had 3 dogs. They had cats in the house. We have cats in the house. And the trainer said that prior to this, they knew nothing about how he was raised. And never has he ever seen a dog match up so perfectly with somebody. And I came back to the room and I called Todd and I told him, and I said, it's almost like 2 years ago, God knew that I was going to need help. I was going to need a little buddy to help me get around. And he said, I'm going to make George for Katie. And I'm going to make him exactly what she needs to help her get around. Because even the trainer said he's never seen anything like that. And you look at the totality of everything that went wrong and everything that went right. What if my phone wasn't in the cubby? I was definitely on borrowed time at that point. What if the neighbor didn't answer? What if the ambulance driver wasn't there? What if I had brain damage? More brain damage, according to Todd. God has just presented himself so much in our lives, and it's hard not to just show and tell everybody everything that he's done. And we've both had issues with, anger and sadness, but at the same time, we are so blessed. And we are so blessed to be here. We're so blessed to be with each other. We're so blessed to be able to do the things that we do. And we want people to know that all of this is God and his glory. And this is exactly what he promised us, that no matter what happens in our life, he is there. Whether we like the situation or not, he promises to be here through everything. And you have to believe, you have to trust. And that even if you don't feel him at the moment, he's there. He's there holding your hand. He's there walking by you. And I want people to have the hope and have the faith that when things aren't going right in their life, or they're sick, or somebody dies in their life, a loved one, that this is part of God's plan. This is part of God's promise. This is what he's done for us. Because can you imagine if I died that day and we didn't have God?
Like I said at the beginning, there's no coincidences. Oh, I almost completely forgot. The week before the accident, Greg preached the sermon, and the theme of it was bloom where you're planted. And that's something that I've tried to keep in mind and to to keep at the forefront of our journey, of our new normal, is that wherever life takes you, wherever you find yourself, you bloom where you're planted. You be the best blind person you can be. You be the best crazy idiot husband you can be. And as long as we live that way and we give it all to God, regardless of what his plan is, I don't know. May not ever know. We may be part of something that we don't even ever see the fruition of.
I hope he gives me a hint. I would like to know. So
yes.
I hope there's a hint coming.
But it's all about God and his kingdom and the furtherance of his plan. And this church has been a big part of that for us. And I don't know that we would have been able to get through it without the support and the love and the prayers of the Carpenters Christian Church, as well as family and friends all over. And we thank you guys very much for letting us come and tell our story.